teachers and students acknowledge diversity?
During my placement week, there were many activities that surrounded stuff like for Father's Day. My mentor teacher was really explicit and in-depth when she was explaining the Father's Day activities, meaning that she would tell all the students that not everyone had the same family. Some family had two dads, as in stepfather or just father, or other stuff. My mentor teacher made the time to explain how each family is different and even used the example of her own family, because she had a stepdad and a dad too. And she also gave the students the opportunity to make two different Father's Day presents if they wanted to. This showed my mentor's understanding of AITSL 1.1, know students and how they learn, as she understood how a student's home life could make them feel alienated at school if they weren't acknowledged.
The school I attended had several students from different cultural backgrounds. The placement teacher, Michelle, acknowledged diversity by encouraging the children to respond in the morning roll call with their first language. If students had gone home and learnt how to say good morning in other languages, they were encouraged to come and use that word the following day. When speaking to Michelle, my placement teacher, at the end of the day, she mentioned she had explained to all the children in her class at the beginning of the year that everybody is different. Some people go home and speak in other languages, some speak more than one at home. She also stated she had told the children that just because you were different or didn't do things in the same way didn't mean that you were abnormal or different or not to be included. Michelle said that she had explained to the children their classroom was a safe place where everybody could come together and learn.
Both examples show how diversity can be acknowledged in such different ways but still have the same inclusive outcome. Ebony's teacher showed how you have to adapt some activities in the classroom to ensure that children don't get upset or feel left out. Alternatively, Brooke's teacher explained how from the beginning of the year she had explained to students that everyone is free to express their true self in the classroom and made sure that they knew that they were in a safe, accepting place. Both examples clearly show how diversity is evident in a school setting and both were well handled to ensure equality.
It's interesting to see that the diversity between Ebony and Brooke's stories related to two different areas. Ebony's story related to the differences in family units and how that difference could have resulted in social inequality if dealt with differently. It's clear that her teacher knew her students from AITSL Standard 1. Brooke's experience with diversity was with culture and ethnicity. I like how her teacher's practice showed respect to and included cultural diversity as outlined in the Melbourne Declaration. Here we see that the multiculturalism is a global and national issue that has affected her students and their learning. How do teachers and students acknowledge Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islanders in the classroom?
Within my placement class was one student who identified as Aboriginal. However, throughout the school there were more students who identified as Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander. Their heritage was recognised throughout the school with the inclusion of the Aboriginal flag as well as the recognition of the traditional landowners. Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander students were commonly allowed to be taken from school in order to participate in the learning of their heritage and traditional customs. The classroom was also taught about Aboriginal history alongside European history. For example, when learning how European settlers used to live, she would also use books and stories to help describe the history. The use of stories when teaching Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander students is important and an effective way to communicate content to the Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander communities.
At my placement school, during Term 1, the Grade 4s focused on Aboriginal Torres Strait Islanders. This was in direct response to the Australian curriculum under Humanities and Social Sciences. The students were involved in a range of activities, beginning with talking about Gondwana land and of the local Aboriginal history of the Boon Wurrung peoples. They discussed dreaming, which is how Indigenous communities shared their connection, laws and history with the land, and wrote their own narrative of Bunjil, the creator of the eagle. They also designed football boots coinciding with the Indigenous round of football. Their focus continued in the art room where they explored Indigenous art and made music sticks with Aboriginal designs and artworks of dot paintings in different medium. These made up a whole wall of display. The term ended in an excursion to the museum.
Both Ebony and Georgie's schools acknowledge Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islanders, but it was in different ways. Ebony had an Aboriginal child at her school whose heritage was recognised during class time as well as around the school. The flags were raised at the beginning of each day, and the student was also able to have days off to participate in traditional customs. Alternatively, Georgie had no Aboriginal students, but her school still acknowledged it as it was in the curriculum. They had Aboriginal dot painting artwork on the wall and also had an Indigenous round of football with Aboriginal designed footy boots.
Both Georgia and Ebony's experience within classroom demonstrates links to several AITSL standards, for example 1.4 Strategies for Teaching Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islanders, 2.4 Understanding and Respecting Aboriginal Torres Strait Islander People to Promote Reconciliation, and AITSL Standard 4.1 Supporting Students' Participation and Engagement in Classroom Activities. Whilst Georgia's teacher focused her lesson around the curriculum to help improve all of the students' educational outcomes, Aboriginal Torres Strait Islander students also continue to be a high priority for national and state governments and jurisdictions in Australia. Under the National Aboriginal Torres Strait Islander Education Strategy, past commitments to education policies such as the Australian curriculum and Australian professional standards for teachers will be built upon to ensure that tertiary governments, education authorities, schools and Aboriginal Torres Strait Islander communities work together to advance the rate of improvement for Aboriginal Torres Strait Islander students and their outcomes. While both Georgie and Ebony had experience with Aboriginal Torres Strait Islander students and activities within the classroom during their placement, research suggests that this does not occur in every school. It has been found that some teachers promote less than 5 minutes per week to teaching Aboriginal Torres Strait Islanders curriculum, literature, languages and cultures, with many of the students within a class not being engaged in those.
How do teachers and students actively include all learners in the daily activities of the classrooms?
Teachers react and adjust to the different learning styles of each of their students. As stated by AITSL 1, Know Students and How They Learn, each child is accepted no matter their learning abilities. The students can then learn from their peers around them that not all people are the same or they learn the same. The teacher's job is also to be aware of how their students learn better in different ways. My teacher had an autistic Down syndrome child who took up a lot of her time. She then had to be aware of her other weaker students so that she could also give them a lot of her time during activities.
On my placement, the students with behaviour issues were put on behaviour plans, which allowed the student to reflect on how they were feeling and how that relates to the way they acted, and if the way they acted was an appropriate reaction to that situation. This didn't separate students who had behaviour problems as bad students, from the students who are behaving normally. The teacher also recognised students' capabilities and disadvantages and paired students up in seating plans with other students who would help each other. For example, a student who was comprehensive at maths but had a quiet demeanour would be sat next to a student who was lacking in mathematical understanding but was quite loud. These two students would bounce off each other's capabilities and bring out the best in each other. This demonstrates how my mentor teacher could implement many effective teaching strategies in all situations in the classroom.
Both experiences, the girls had supported inclusive student participation, which is backed up by the point of Groundwater, Smith and al, stating that teachers need to create inclusive classrooms. It appears to me though, in Sarah's story, the class was accepting of all abilities, however the teacher's time wasn't shared equally. It is a difficult situation, but when does equity begin to disadvantage average students or allow brighter ones to be challenged? In these cases, there should be provisions for a government-funded teaching aid. In Ebony's story, I found it interesting how the teachers' work incorporated the strategic grouping of students.
In Ebony's experience, her teachers' use of imagination and pedagogical practices have offered each child an opportunity to expand on their skills that they might be lacking by pairing them with more confident students to promote more hopeful learning trajectories. Sarah's teacher, on the other hand, appears to be more limited and constrained due to the weaker students within the class. According to COMA, it cannot be taken for granted that social support within a classroom is equally available to everyone. Some children will have to work harder than others to get the support they need. For teachers, supporting each student is a balancing act of negotiation and possibility. Both Ebony and Sarah's experience within the classroom demonstrates the teacher's ability to provide an inclusive learning environment which does not single out or discriminate a single child just because they have a disability.